Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Conflict, the podcast where we talk about conflicts and intercultural communication. And today you will introduce us to the field of intercultural communications, right? And brought us something about low context and high context. And I think we're very curious to learn more about it.
Yes, I'm very curious. Well, I'm not curious, but I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it. So, I guess what a lot of people still like, they are unclear what is intercultural communication. And I said it the same like with mediation the last time, a meditation, like there's a lot of confusion. So, a quick introduction to this. It's basically the successful process of communicating with having in mind that we have cultural differences. So it's a way that respects each way and adapts to it. So we kind of, there's not a conflict happening or clashes are happening. And what is already in the word intercultural communication is culture itself. So maybe my first question to you would be, what is culture to you?
I think I personally connected with so many positive emotions, traveling, trying new food, going in a different country, experience different cultures. When there, it's going to be difficult, right? What is actually the culture? Like, is it the habit? Is it the lifestyle? Is it the food? Is it a perspective on how to see the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in another term, it's even difficult because talking about differences between different countries also opens up this whole field of racism and cultural differences and stereotypes. And I think my question would be actually to you,
Sure.
how can we define culture as a term without um, avoiding this whole discussion about racism and cultural differences? I feel like for me, it feels kind of like this defining a culture with different, I don't know, stereotypes or different values
Yeah.
feels like something that makes sense. But at the same time, I have the fear of, is that okay? Does it open a whole discussion?
Let's think very small about it. Okay, happen. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of confusion that we often think culture is national culture, right? Because you connect it to, oh, I'm going abroad, I try out new food. So first of all, food would be considered a cultural element. Language is considered a cultural element. A religion can be a cultural element. But for example, culture is not always connected to nations. Let's think very small and think family culture. So we are all raised in different families and it has its own culture itself. So culture is not just, let's say, the food that we just grab around the corner or the language we hear. It's basically as well like behavior norms, right? Because we know it, especially what we have this clash when we go abroad, I guess, or maybe even when you enter another family. It's like,
Are different.
oh, okay, they have like different like things how they live their life. Like I don't know, people leave their shoes outside before stepping in, or they leave them on. It's a certain set of meaning. So basically, what culture is a shared system of meaning, and that comes then with rules and different kind of perception, right? So when we look at culture, we will always have something that we understand very, or let's say it's very visible to us directly. So or hearable when it comes to language, right? We go abroad, we don't understand anything. Like we're like, what are they talking about? Or
Sometimes you just travel to a different state in Germany.
or like
I feel like I don't understand anything. So, from what I heard from you, I would sum it up in a way that there is basically a general culture, like it's a German culture, but there's also local cultures, like in Cologne, where we are. There's carnival and specific traditions and ropes, and
yes,
and then we have like very tiny cultures in a family. So we have cultures within cultures, basically. There's different levels of cultural frameworks.
Yeah, you can have culture in anything. You can have a fan culture, football fan culture, or like other fan culture. It basically means there's a group that shares a specific set of meaning.
And their specific set of meaning they maybe share with other
Exactly.
football clubs, for example, as well. And then there's a broader perspective of
Yeah.
frameworks, and then you can get basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really cool to realize, that it's not always nations, because you are influenced by so many cultures. You're influenced by your family culture. You're influenced by your Cologne culture, right? I guess we have a stronger the connection with our Cologne culture than with the German culture. The both of us, I think. I am always saying like, no, my culture is Cologne. But so like to keep in mind, we are at the end of the day, like we as humans, we are influenced by different part of culture as well as of course our own personality. This is why not everyone in your family is the same. You could say, well, we grew up in the same kind of culture, but you're not the same. So always keep in mind, and then this is where kicks in the stereotypes and the prejudice, and what you also referenced before is at the end, you're not just a product of your nation's culture. Not just because you're German, I can say, oh yeah, I heard about Germans are always on time, like, and you could say like, well, I'm never on time, for example. Not that it's true, but maybe it is true for both of us. For both of us, yeah, like today. But a few minutes later, like 1.5 hours. But I think that is very important to know, when especially, and that kicks in when people have less knowledge about a specific nation, let's say, they always think everyone is the same because you just don't know enough. And this is why I'm such a fan of the subject in general, culture, and to think about it, because it's very, very big, and it's way bigger than you think, right? Like, because people will always say like, yeah, culture, I love different cultures, love to travel, the languages and the food, but there's way, way more than this, right? Like you might go in a culture and you stand there and you actually end up having a culture clash, which is basically you don't know what's happening because everything that you think is different to what you enter or like encounter, basically. Understanding culture, what we see and what shapes us. When we talk about culture, we often think about visible and observable things and differences, like languages, food, or clothing. But have you ever stopped to wonder, is that really all culture is? Because culture goes much deeper than what we can see on the surface. So let's have a look into what culture actually means and how it influences the way we think, communicate, and interpret the world. The Iceberg Model, looking beneath the surface. The first model I like to introduce is the Iceberg Model. Some of you might already know it from psychology, sociology, economics, business, and management. That's because this model can be used in many different ways. It's a metaphor for situations where a small visible part is connected to a much larger hidden one, just like an iceberg. In 1976, the anthropologist Edward T. Hall applied this model to intercultural communications. His goal was to help us better analyze and understand what culture really is. So imagine culture as an iceberg floating in the ocean. What you see above the water is the observable part of culture: the languages, gestures, food, clothing, or greeting rituals. This is usually what we notice first when we encounter in a new culture. It's what feels different, new, and interesting. But just like a real iceberg, most of it lies below the surface. Hidden beneath the water is the largest part of culture. This includes values, beliefs, norms, assumptions, traditions, and unspoken rules, like ideas about what is polite, respectful, and normal, as well as many, many more. These deeper cultural elements guide how people think, decide, and react, often without them even realizing it. And that's often the iceberg at work. We usually only notice these hidden rules when they are challenged, when expectations clash, or when communication breaks down. From iceberg to software, Hofstede's triangle. Now that we've seen how much of culture lies beneath the surface, let's look at another model that helps explain how culture shapes us. This model comes from Geert Hofstede. Hofstede described culture as the software of the mind. And no, this software doesn't come with a manual. It's programmed into us gradually, through family, school, society, and shared experiences. To explain this idea, Hofstede uses a triangle. At the base of the triangle is human nature. This is what we are born with, universal traits shared by all humans, emotions, the need for connection, and the ability to communicate. Above that sits culture. This is the learned part of our mental software. Culture teaches us how to express emotions, how to relate to authority, and how to deal with time, conflict, and cooperation. Most of the time, we don't even notice this programming. It just runs quietly in the background. At the top of the triangle is personality. This is the individual layer, our personal experiences, traits, and choices. That layer makes us unique and different from anyone, even those within the same culture. Together, these two models remind us of something important. Culture influences us, but it doesn't control us. In the iceberg, you have a part that is visible and a part that is non-visible. And the non-visible part is usually way bigger, right? Because culture, let's say a national culture, doesn't just exist out of language and food, right? So you have in the lower part, you have something like belief systems, beliefs, traditions, rituals. So if you don't know it, you might observe it or not even observe it, but it's there. And
Do you have an example for that?
well, okay, I can take an example for a friend of mine. This is we're referencing to behavior norms. So it is, for example, when someone invites you for dinner and you you get asked if you want to have some more. She told me that you first have to say at least 2 or 3 times no, and then maybe after that you say yes, right? That is something, if you are not used to this in your culture, that's you wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I would probably say yes the first time. So that is just something that is
Actually, I had a similar story of that. Yeah, not of the. I know which friend you're talking, right? It's our common friend. But I have I met this girl. She came to Germany when she was quite young, and she came from Arabic culture, or like the also a tradition where you basically are very polite and you ask and you say no, no, no before you say yes. And she said like she had a went to preschool and her friend invited her over for dinner and she went then home and then the mom was, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? And she said no because she learned I cannot say yes. And but she came home in the evening and her mom was like, how was it? And she's like, I'm so hungry for first it didn't give me food. Because the mom thought if she says no, she's not hungry and she doesn't want to eat. Of course. But she came home like she really was thirsty and hungry, but because she wasn't used to the culture of saying directly what she.
That's actually a good example we could later go to because I have like a cultural dimension that is referring exactly to that kind of communication style. So basically, yeah, it can be traditions, rituals, something that is not tangible, like food or like hearable, like languages. Just basically some set of rules that are just invisible. It could be simply something as well. What is polite, what is not polite, right? Like I don't know, do you 3 times ring the doorbell or is one enough or do you don't want to disturb, like all these tiny things that we are used to when we grew up in it but are very unusual when we are like new to this kind of set. So of course over time different people developed different ideas to kind of figure out what are cultural elements, like where do nations, sorry to say, but we often connect more like cultures to a specific
It's
nation.
okay, right? It's like from like a research perspective, you can say nations have specific culture.
Yes, because of course it is already generalized. These people are in between certain borders, and we kind of say they're developing as well together as well as locally. But like for example, the stereotype or cliche that Germans are very on time, somewhere it's true, but you can never say every German is on time, right?
So I know on average there's a tendency
There's a tendency.
in certain group of people that they will tend to.
Exactly.
And even if we talk about
if we are not like this, it's a tendency to be on time.
even this, it's not like we normally come 3-4 hours late. It's like even that, like the tendency is still
There's a little bit of truth in it, but I think the important thing is never to assume everyone that is coming from a specific culture you have an idea about is exactly 100% like this. Because as again we said, through your life you are you're influenced to different cultures and things and people and your own personality, so kind of like it gives you a hint, but it should never give you a full 100% opinion about a person.
Can't rely on it.
Yeah, exactly. Edward G. Hall, the guy I was referencing today, he developed 3 cultural dimensions. So that means like there are categories where you can make differences visible. He came up with 3. I will only focus on one, but I will quickly mention all of the 3. So first of all is the high and low context cultures. Then there is proxemics, which is space. That means not the outer space, it's more the space between people. Like,
kind of, if I'm like,
yeah, like, do I feel comfortable when Louis constantly like, Teresa, nice to meet you. Are you? And you're like, what the heck? What does he want? You go, really? Exactly. And that's the
trying to kiss me or saying hello, I'm usually like,
oh, you know, better sell myself. And the third one is a polychronic versus monochronic. It's referring to the time. So the time is viewed either as linear, this comes one step after another, or it's kind of like parallel and not really has an end and has a beginning and an
our
end.
understanding of it
Differs. Yeah. Yeah.
and
I want to know more about it. Then you realize what you kind of have.
definitely not.
So yeah, so the high and low context culture, basically like the word already says, it's very it's referring to the communication we have, like right when we talk to each other, basically.
Let's
focus on exactly. So high context means you have, besides the words, next to the words I'm telling you, you have a lot of meaning that the other person needs to decode. Before I say a little bit more to this, the low context culture is exactly the opposite. So low context culture means I say what I mean. Everything I want you to understand, I'm giving you in words. So, and I guess this is a perfect translation to us and our nation's culture. I guess the Germans, how are we? I guess we are very direct. That means we are from a low context culture. So this is the stereotype, and it is true. I think we can all agree on that. Is we are not shy in saying what we want to say and what we like meant to say, right? We would rather say compared to high context cultures, other countries.
But there are even cultures that are even more direct than.
Yeah, I mean, like it's we're not the. I don't know if we're the number one, but for example, I don't know, the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, there are some Scandinavian countries that are even more direct, and I realized this in work situation, but also in private situations.
Yeah,
because where people were like, actually, when I was in high school and I was spending my time abroad in America, and I was enjoying the food of American culture, which is not very healthy. And I came back. And this Norwegian, like it's the husband of my mom's friend, he was like, "Oh, you gained a lot of weight. You should work out." And I was like, even the Germans wouldn't be so direct.
I guess like you were not always aware from which culture you are until you kind of clash with someone else, right? In that moment. That's what I wanted to work out anyway. Yeah, so basically, I think it's a very, very interesting subject, and that can lead to a lot of conflict actually, because when you, for example, have us Germans being very direct, it's often seen as very rude.
Yeah.
Because we would say, oh, when I asked you, oh, do you like it? And you would probably say, if you don't like it, no, I don't like it. But I would be like, how can you say that to me, Or
And also from different perspective, I remember when I was in Korea, I knew that the way of communication is more indirect. Also in India, I also experienced the same thing. And knowing that it's more indirect, I was really insecure of how to. I really overthought, is this a yes? Is this a yes that means no? Is it a yes that means maybe? Did she really just forgot that we wanted to meet that day, or is it actually she wanted to say no? Can I ask this person again? Like knowing, like having already the reflection of, okay, I'm a low context, coming from a low context culture,
Yeah.
being in a high context culture, not exactly knowing when the person says yes or no. I think it's also interesting, like, how do we deal with this, right? Because it's not like you cannot look up in the in some book or podcast or whatever
Yeah.
an advice where they say, okay, you can ask again, you cannot ask again.
Yeah. I think that's a good question because it refers to everything, right? When we are insecure about why is a culture behaving like this and how am I actually getting the knowledge to get there. I think it's never a bad idea to ask, you know. I think that is not, it doesn't have to be like, give me now all the solutions to the problems I have. But I think to show a general interest in a culture is usually people really love and appreciate if someone wants to learn like about your own culture. It shows a way of appreciation and respect to say, you know, it's very interesting for me. Like it's also difficult for me right now, but what is polite, or how should I act in a certain way, you know, because we cannot expect that everyone knows everything about one's own culture. And I think it's just nice to go the step maybe and just ask, because I think it's a polite way to show respect and appreciation about it. So yeah, but it's very I guess this is the point that is just really interesting as well, when we realize, you know, we can both say we are from low context cultures, and even the thought about a high context culture, which when you're a person that is from a high context culture, you might have often difficulties to, or maybe not difficulties, but you're not so used to saying no. And you would rather say, I don't know, I consider it regarding the context, or you would reformulate it, right? But
It would, even in some cultures, you should say yes, but people from the culture know if the yes is a yes and no or maybe, and they see it in your face, in your body language.
yeah,
But if you're not used to read that,
yeah,
you have to learn it, right?
yeah, exactly. I think probably the low context cultures have, like ours, have more difficulties to read the high context, or like to get the capacity to read it better, because it's a lot of reading between the lines, right? Someone might say, um, um, like the
Then with meet, right? Like, let's see, the first week in Korea, I had so many people, and I was like really aiming to get to know the culture.
Yeah.
That's why I focused on getting to know Koreans and not international other exchange students, right?
Yeah.
So I really always, when I met someone, I was like, oh, hey, I'm new here, would really love to meet up. Would you want to grab dinner one day, or do you want to do something? And most of them said yes. And then they even texted me and offered me when to meet. But there were also a few where they said yes. And then we exchanged Instagram, and then we texted. But then the person didn't text back. Now it's like, maybe this person forgot, because, you know, sometimes you just forget.
Yeah.
But maybe the person also has no interest, no time, maybe no capacity, is not interested, whatever. And then I was like, should I ask this person again? It's like, okay, maybe I mean, I ended up saying something, I think, like, hey, if you're really busy, I really understand, probably fine if you can make it. But if you change your mind, or if something comes up, let me know. I'm around. Let's grab lunch or something. And most of them came back later. You know, it wasn't even that there were so many. They would have probably find an excuse to not meet if they wouldn't want to do it. But I was very like, because, you know, I didn't want to be impolite, being some in a country where I'm not familiar with the behavior.
Yeah.
So
And it's you kind of take a reference to the other element, which is time perspective, right? So I guess like there is also a lot of differences how we view time, and it was interesting actually for me now that I realize, because I would not say I'm, you know, I don't need to make plans like a week before or something like this, you know,
until you work with me.
yes, you're a little bit different. But you know, when I was in Mexico actually, and I wanted to meet a person there, because I'm like super chilled, but I probably would still like to have an answer like in the afternoon, because we kind of said we got to meet in the evening, right? And we kind of agreed, okay, let's meet the next 2 days, or like in tomorrow. And then I texted this girl in the afternoon, hey, does it still stand? And when do you want to meet? And then we chatted like later, and when I met her, she was like, yeah, and I thought it was a little bit too direct that you asked me already when are we gonna meet in the afternoon. But I was like, well, otherwise I would maybe just do something else in day. I now realized, am I really like this? I thought I was very spontaneous. But she kind of told me it was not rude, but a little bit like, what does she want from me now? Why does she text me in the afternoon when I'm gonna see her in the evening? It was very interesting. So kind of we realized this a lot with different things. Now I just wanted to talk about high-low context culture, but yeah, there are different things. So I guess to to learn about high context culture for us would be, really pay attention and how someone is transmitting like the message. What kind of tone does he have, or gestures when you're live, or when you see it written, like realize, is that person, like how is he or she responding to what you just said? For example, I mean, it can be in workplace, yeah, in the workplace too, to say, do you think, or can you make the deadline? Let's say I ask you, and in a low context culture, you would say, yes, I can make the deadline, or no, I cannot make the deadline. Like, I can tell you already, it's gonna be very difficult, and I probably will not make it. You give a clear answer. But a low context culture would be
High
that,
context.
high context culture could be like, would be, for example, there are a lot of issues, but I will make it.
Mhm.
Yeah, then I would think like, okay, there's a lot of issues, but he can make it.
Yeah.
But probably for the high context culture, is like there is a big issue. I'm already telling you. You might not make it. Yeah, but it's
But I can say it because otherwise I also wear something like having standing there in like in a not in the spotlight. You could like
exactly like
you admit to
yes.
yeah, kind of produce your face like get
Yeah, Gesichtwahren had you have in German. I don't know what is in English. Maybe we can translate it in subtitles. But yeah, it's kind of just a different way of, yeah, it's hard to describe, but it's just a different way of addressing an issue or talking to people. You want to keep it. I think positive is not the right description, but you just don't want to set it in stone. It's impossible or possible, or I'm there at that time, and it's still a little, it's more vague, I would say. It leaves more flexibility in it. And
but also for the people who can read it, because I think coming from a low context culture in a high context culture,
Mhm.
there it seems like there's a lot of space. Like
Mhm.
that seems like there's room for interpretation.
Mhm.
But if you grow up in the high context culture,
Mhm.
right? It's for them, I think it's very clear and direct. They know. So for them there is no space. They know, okay, this person wants something to eat, wants something to drink. Maybe this cannot make the deadline. The person will know what to do with this information, right? So for them, it's direct. It just if you come from this other context,
Yeah, I
it's
think it is.
indirect.
I think direct is maybe not the right word, because direct is already one line, and you
But
feed
it's
in
clear.
one line.
It's not. It is clear. It's not vague.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
is
not
not.
basic.
It is not vague, but it's in itself. Let's say the time.
Mm.
When I don't know, you say you'll be there soon, coming from a high context culture, that other person knows. Okay, that person's just on the way to me, but you have no idea if it's 20 minutes or 2 hours.
Mhm.
But kind of that information gives you already the information. It will be still today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is
But
now.
also, if you know where the person lives, you kind of know.
Yeah, you know it's probably not going to take 8 hours, but it's not going to be happening in the next 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit more tolerance in the vagueness, and that's fine. And that's kind of like understood in itself really
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
Okay. to sum it up, yeah, and also to give an advice for people coming. Let's first advice. You come from, imagine you're coming from a high context culture.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give entering a low context culture?
Well, I think it is. I would say try to build up a tolerance that there is a very direct approach when you speak to people to a low context culture. I mean, or they speak to you. I think it's important to understand that it is not meant as something personal or rude the way we communicate. It's just we are very direct and we also appreciate a direct answer because, of course, if you ask me, can you do that? You kind of want an honest answer, right? I mean, review this maybe a little bit with honesty and dishonesty, or like not
Coming
honestly.
from a low context culture.
Exactly, coming from a low context culture. So it's a little bit confusing and irritating for us to kind of have a little bit of tolerance and acceptance with us. Then we're gonna appreciate directness and yeah, maybe even try to formulate as well. And because we are, let's say, we are not used to read between the lines. It is very hard for us to, when someone tells you no, to hear yes. Because we very used to hear no as a no.
Yeah.
Right?
Interpret a no.
And to interpret a no, yes. So I think that is the best advice I would give to, think about what we mean by this. We just want to be understood, in the way we mean it. We don't want to be seen as rude, even though maybe
So maybe that's a good advice. Yeah, coming from a high context culture. If you feel like the person is rude and it seems rude, probably it's not.
yeah.
Have this in mind. And maybe the other way around, coming from a low context culture, entering a high context culture. What advice would you give the other person?
Well, I think exactly the opposite. Really pay attention to, mm, when you're live, really how someone is saying it, and which tone is he saying this, with gestures is it saying it. Often also silence is used to express something. So if someone needs a longer time to express something, that's already a message. Maybe it's, oh, I'm unclear, or I'm feeling not secure enough, or I'm not sure if I can make it, and there was a pause before. So this is telling us something.
For resume, I think it's a constant process of reflection.
Yeah.
You always have to reflect, where are we right now? Where's the other person? Because even if someone lives abroad and they come home, maybe they take away something from the other culture, and then there is an irritation at home where the culture where I basically come from. So just reflect always if you meet people and have this concept in mind that there is high and low context.
Yeah.
And it helps you to kind of open specific boxes and look, take a specific glasses to wear and say, okay, now I know this is going to be probably high context. I'm aware of gestures, mimic, pauses.
Yeah.
Or I'm in a very low context culture and I'm trying to not take it personally.
Yeah.
Being very direct, also telling what I need.
Yeah.
Even if it's uncomfortable, going out of my comfort zone. I try to be very direct. And then it will help to reduce conflicts
Exactly.
with different people within different contexts. And I think maybe that's something you can try out in your private life, traveling, or maybe watching the next movie.
Yeah.
And seeing I think it's interesting if you watch a movie and you see oh, how do they behave, what's going on.
I think what the key thing is here, when you have a confusion point, when you literally okay, why are they doing this? You realize your own perspective in that moment, because when you question why someone else is doing it, you have a different opinion how to do it. I think this is a beautiful moment because that there begins a learning process. You can literally say, my understanding ends here. I'm a bit confused, but that's the moment kind of to say, you know what, I want to learn more about it, or I want to understand it. And you can find very different ways in doing this. You either ask the people where you live with and come from the culture, or just to read a little bit more about it. And the second advice is also give yourself a little bit of time, because it always takes some time to understand cultural parts. Just imagine you grow up your lifelong probably in, or most of the time, in one specific national culture, and you no one really explained, okay, Teresa, this is now the cultural element of the Germans in this, and the time in this. You just grow up and it's normal for you. So I think the point is here, if you're confused or a little bit irritated or maybe frustrated even, take that as something to realize you are just taking off your own cultural glasses because you cannot see through them anymore. It's not fitting, and it's a good way and point to start, tell, I just want to learn more about it. Tell me more about it. I think don't be shy to ask. It's way better to ask than to judge. Always way better to ask. We don't want to judge at the end of the day. We don't want to think other people are rude or stupid, really, really drastically spoken. But this is why stereotypes and prejudice coming from. It's basically just we don't understand something yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's ask questions
So let's ask questions.
and follow us for more.